What's up, everybody? This is Blue Toshi, and on my right is Disco, and this is Decentralens. How you doing today, Disco?
I'm fiery. I'm good to go. Happy to be in the seat.
Yeah, we just had a great interview with Snoop Toshi that will release shortly, maybe after this video or later today or tomorrow. But there's a lot going on in the news, and we just did a audible pivot. Memento Mori is live. Memento Mori is officially trading Casey's token, and as you can see here, it's holding its value so far. It started trading within the hour. I think we're just at the hour mark. It's a little up where it was, and there's a ton listed for sale. I believe people were getting free lots of 5,000 to join Casey's Patreon. And those 5,000 lots are going just under $1,000 right now. So for those of you who did get in, congratulations. And
Yeah.
for those of you who are going to get involved in this insane mint in 57 blocks for the other half of the supply that wasn't given out by Casey to folks he knew and through Patreon, then good luck with that. I'm curious to see what the Bitcoin fees are around this, but this is exciting. So MEMENTO-MORI is indeed live.
Yeah, it's fun to see some activity, over on the rune side. And kind of, it's been a long time since there was a real excitement around new collections or new offerings. So at least we got something to kind of watch cook and keep an eye on.
Yeah, absolutely. And MEMENTO-MORI, it's kind of a cool, there's Inscription, an offshoot of Inscription Zero, Casey's Inscription for you. But MEMENTO-MORI, we know means remember, you must die, which sounds macabre and terrible and horrible, but it means, hey, while you're alive, we're all going to die. We're all going to be, mushroom fuel. So, like, enjoy your life and have fun and don't be a douchebag and don't create drama where drama is not necessary. So,
Yeah, I like it's kind of the dawn of the Day of the Dead and all that sort of vibe, kind of tying into tomorrow with Halloween, so it all kind of kicks together, makes some sense.
yeah, absolutely. So we'll cover this and we'll come back to it later in the show. But MEMENTO-MORI is live and so far seems to be holding with 5,000 lots being at about $1,000. So that said, this is Decentralens.
This is Decentral Lens, distilling the crypto news you need to know and why.
All right. So we covered the basics and we covered what's coming out right now, which is MEMENTO-MORI, but there's a lot of stuff to cover today, Disco. So let's get back to MEMENTO-MORI and let's dive in. So we had a great kind of palate cleanser precursor with Snoop Toshi learning about Bitcoin operating systems. Like that's one that I know I'll be rewatching to be like, wow, there's so much going on here. How cool is that?
Yeah, it's like you look at it, and sometimes from our perspective, we're looking at it like, oh, are there clips, or there things that we can share? And it's like, dude, pretty much start to finish, it was an educational roadmap of just things that I didn't even know. But it's just so. I think one of the biggest takeaways I had was simply the bullishness that he was feeling in terms of the activity and the developers, finding a home on Bitcoin. And, with all the things going on, there's many, Bitcoin narratives that are extremely bullish, but having that kind of validated from that perspective was a real eye opener as well.
Yeah, absolutely. So we can't wait to share that one with you. That'll release, that'll go live on Twitter probably after this show, or we'll do it later today or for sure tomorrow. Or Friday,
Yeah.
but that's a good one because the evolution of Bitcoin, with OPCAT or without, is mind-boggling to me sometimes. And I think Snoop Toshi and his team are kind of at the forefront of what's going on, not only with crypto, but with virtual reality and a lot of other elements as well that are all kind of fusing to this future that we're looking at. So what happened yesterday, Disco? We almost did it. I don't think we got there, though, did we? Bitcoin
No,
just about
we
almost got to an
we
all-time high.
flirted. We flirted. We were right there.
Yeah.
It was. I think we touched. We were probably within $400 or so of hitting the all-time high, and you have that sense of inevitability, and you just start looking at just some of the data. And I know we've been doing this for months and months, talking inflows, outflows, and everything like that. But you hear up only, you hear inflows, and you start looking at just some of these numbers coming in. And when you're starting to test a all-time high and you're not having a big kind of downside after you get there, it really shows that we're sitting at the precipice of kind of this new potential price exploration. And I think it's pretty much anyone's guess as to where it can go. We've talked about the toothpaste out of the tube for months, and feels like a year, but now we're really starting to see that inevitability come into play. And there's a lot of big factors for it, and you're just seeing them all kind of culminate.
Yeah, absolutely. And Bitcoin and Solana again seem to be the two that, for every time they go up 3 or 4%, ETH goes up 1%. Or, it's actually a little reversal today. It feels like Bitcoin's down $1,000 or so. Solana's down a little, and ETH actually kind of held its ground at 2,600, was even slightly up when we checked like an hour ago. But, it just seems like we've been talking about it a lot, but with Ethereum, there's just too much going on. Solana gets the new entrance and Bitcoin's the mother chain. ETH, I feel like it's going to have a tough time, but we're going to talk about a couple L2s today, and maybe we have too many L2s, but yeah, it's 71,000. Just to be in the 70,000 range is nice again. It's funny because if we now hang here between like 69 and 72, people be like, oh, this 70, I can't stand it, but at some point it's going to rip. I assume this is pre-election. I think a lot of people with the election are probably now like, Trump's with all the Elon and the RFK strategy, and you're Gabby, and you're hearing all these different people speak to different audiences from a corporation or from a group standpoint. It seems like that strategy may be working. So maybe this is the pre-election, we're feeling like a Republican victory here. I don't know. What do you think?
Yeah, I don't know, man. I think that there's been a big shift just in the kind of on the street, and it almost feels like, it feels like both, people are accepting that it's going to come to a head in 6 days. So we're seeing all that. But if you look at, the market as any indicator or predictor of, kind of the sentiment and where things really feel on the ground, it definitely feels as if it's going to be a pro crypto and pro Bitcoin administration. And I also think that, we'll probably see some significant ticks and changes and the legislative side of things. So there really could be a very few roadblocks ahead of us.
Yeah. We'll see. I don't know if I'd say few roadblocks, but I guess if Trump wins, then literally it would be snow plowed for us, right? With, if the other side wins, not as smooth sailing. But for me, it's just like Bitcoin doesn't care, and we have to keep fighting regardless. So I guess I've almost come to peace with this election. I think what turned it for me was I saw a video, and literally it was the same language. I think we talked about this on the show a couple of weeks ago, and both Democrats and Republicans, since the 1970s, were like, this is the most important election for our democracy. And granted, the stakes feel way higher in the 2020s for sure. And that, since Trump came on the scene, because there's the Democrats and the Republicans are more divisive than they've ever been. But I guess when I heard that, I was like, is this just same old, and they're trying to get us to fear vote into this? It's probably a combination of both, but I guess I've early voted. I'm done. I've made my peace with it. I'm happy with my vote. I'm in Illinois. My vote doesn't really matter. I hate to say it, but it doesn't. But I think I've come to peace with the election and whatever happens after. And that's a good feeling. I'm not on edge at all.
Yeah, no, it gives you this sense of you did what you were going to do. You did, your limited impact, let's be honest, but at least you kind of made your own peace with your decision, and now let the chips fall where they may. And I kind of come back to this overall kind of gratitude feeling of being able to be, a part of all that's going on. And we're in a very nice situation with America overall. We should be, instead of being upset about it, we should be proud and really be grateful for the opportunities we have. Because you look at all the leadership in so many different areas, and we're in the front. And I really think we need to take some time to appreciate that instead of looking at all the problems.
Yeah, agreed. Was that your cat?
No.
Wait, what?
I don't have one.
Weird. I just saw a cat literally. Did you see that?
Yes, I had no idea what it was.
Was that like a pre-Halloween ghost?
I know, it's very...
I did have an elder bug on my screen. Maybe he went right across from the camera, but it looked to me like something came on, then jumped straight across the screen. I guess we'll look at the video and see. Happy Halloween, everybody. That is effed up. So
I don't have a cat. I don't have a cat in the house. So it's
I was going to say, I don't remember you talking about Smokey or Frosty the cat. But there, just look at these numbers. I feel like we covered this so much in the spring and early summer, but look at these Bitcoin numbers. This is mind melting. So you've got basically the 29th, which was what? Today's the 30th. So yesterday you had 870 million. You almost had $1 billion come into Bitcoin yesterday. $500 million the day before, almost $500 million the day before that. And then a paltry 200 million, or a fifth of $1 billion on the 24th. So this whole week has been nothing but just pure insanity. Like 479, 870, don't know what today's going to bring, but BlackRock just surpassed $30 billion in an ETF, making it the fastest growing ETF of all time. In fact, the gold ETF, the first one, took 1,790 days, so 1790 days to get to 30 billion in assets under management. It took Bitcoin 299. So not even 300 days, not even a full year. So if people, for all your normie friends out there, and for people who aren't into crypto or Bitcoin, who are still, reading the New York Times or just writing it off because of what Elizabeth Warren's saying, like, wake the fuck up. And like, it's happening, whether you want it to or not. It's been way messier than we thought, but it's happening. And I don't care. We want Bitcoin. We want everyone to self-custody their own Bitcoin, because that's what Bitcoin was meant to do. And hopefully we get a whole new generation to do that. The institutional adoption certainly is good for number go up. It's certainly bad for other reasons, but one cannot ignore the institutional adoption as just being, it's beyond insane how big it is.
Well, it's just a driver that didn't exist before in previous cycles. And, it was before it kind of got into play, and before those ETFs got approved, we were all sitting there like, okay, where's retail? Are they going to come over to Bitcoin? Are they going to come over to this or that? And instead of seeing it from more of a retail perspective, we're seeing it just from these, Goliaths coming into play. And, we're having conversations that we've been, precursors or thoughts for, months about, well, when are the companies going to wake up? And we're starting to see that come to life in terms of votes and strategies. So all of this influence and a lot of the, kind of think, once he kind of flipped and got in and was orange pilled, like, you can see just the long tail effects of, kind of that one major decision and kind of shift and be like, okay, I get this, I'm on board, let's go. So you see that, kind of driving this whole different train than we've ever seen before.
Yeah, I mean, just IBIT, BlackRock got 642 million yesterday. It's funny, I did read that they were at 30 billion. This is saying 25 billion. I know this is just a net in. Maybe that was total in or something, but regardless, the number's just massive. And remember, if GBTC wasn't such a overpriced shit show, they're at negative 20 billion. So one could argue a lot of that went into these other funds, but we're 23 billion over that. So the net in, not including them, is 43 billion. It's just mind meltingly big, but you wonder why. This is why the institutions are adopting it. And we haven't even got into Florida yet, who's the latest one to have people ruffling heavy feathers to get them in. So is there anything else as far as Bitcoin all-time highs, Disco, that and topic-wise we want to cover kind of in this section?
Well, I just think that, how much of this is, people with a lot of information and intelligence on this looking at it and really thinking that we may be seeing, some shoes dropping from, the debt and the inflation side of it once we get to the, kind of administration. No matter what, it'll be a shift in the administration in terms of who's president, but how much of this is kind of protecting and positioning, for something that could be coming that a lot of people are just, choosing not to take a look at.
Yeah, absolutely. And one more just look before we go, because I think we're gonna kind of compare and contrast Bitcoin to Ethereum again, where a lot of us art lovers and NFT enjoyers came from before we got back to the mother chain for ordinals. But Ethereum is net down 485 million. Now, granted, Grayscale is out 3 billion, so they're net. All the other ones are net up 2.5 billion. Right. Where's BlackRock? So BlackRock has 1.3 billion. Fidelity has 500 million. So I mean, it's not like people aren't investing in ETH. They're certainly not investing in Grayscale. So that's making the number look way worse than it is, because that was a more expensive option. But the Ethereum ETFs, which just kind of like squeaked into existence, aren't really covering it. And it brings up a much kind of bigger story in question. You got Vitalik. We talked about him last week. I think it was 4 last week articles in a row. The surge, the splurge, the purge, and the merge, and whatever rhymes with urge is a post of his in the last couple of weeks. But now I think he's up to 6, and he's chirping a ton on X as well. So I don't know, Disco. Go ahead.
It feels like, defensive to a degree, right? And you kind of want, the leader or founder to be, an advocate and do that. But it also, when you start hearing it, you start wondering what the motivation and what's really there. And, to be like, hey, leave us alone. We're doing what we're doing. It's like, well, you are a lot of people have bought into what you've said and put their investments in there and had a lot of belief. And, you remember, a couple of years ago, it was everyone talking about how, I'm irresponsibly long Ethereum, and it's going to be this, world's changer and solver of all these things. And now we're seeing some of the strategy, from the, kind of L2many's out there. How's that really playing into, to this grand plan?
That'd actually be a great t-shirt, L2many. And right. only people who had such insider knowledge, they'd have to know Ethereum intimately, probably have come back to Bitcoin full throttle and just abandon ETH. But yeah, I like that shirt, L2many, because there are too many L2s. And now, I mean, we're talking about L3s, and I get it, because at some point you want the blockchain to be invisible, and this next generation of normies, they don't want to even know there's a blockchain there. The blockchain just serves as the immutable underlying engine with, on the ETH side, with ETH is layer 1 rolling up to the layer 2s. And apparently now you're going to have layer 3s, but at some point it's too many layers. There's too many layer 2s. It doesn't feel like the benefits are coming back to ETH. I feel like Vitalik's 6 articles, the splurge, the merge, the gorge, whatever they are, right, like you said, they were, that's fine. He was the architect of Ethereum, and he's passionate about it. I think that's great. But when I see that combined with posts like this, like Ethereum people should not feel a need to justify the inadequacies of the present. This is from Vitalik in a post, I believe this was yesterday, October 29th, yesterday. Justifying the present is a natural thing to gravitate towards when one feels powerless to build the future. But we are building the future. Cross L2 interop roadmap. And then he's got a couple sheets of charts and diagrams and, to non-coders like us, gobbledygook. So right. I applaud him for it, but I also... this is a red flag to me, whereas the other posts weren't as bad, because it's like, hey, this is where we're going, guys. Like, let's all kumbaya and galvanize forces here. This to me is kind of like, don't worry about now, judge the future. And we saw how long it took to get from proof of work to proof of stake. I mean, that was a Herculean task. There were other chains that had proof of stake, so they had a roadmap there, but they did it their own way. It was in Solidity, so they had to, it had to be developed in a certain way. Like, there's no guarantee that these next iterations, these could take 1, 2, 5, 10 plus years, and they could have issues. So like, this to me is like, I've got several validators validating ETH, and I am slowly unstaking them. I unstaked my first one this morning, Disco, and I'm just waiting for it to clear. But to me, this is not a good sign. In crypto, I don't want a founder, right? I think Vitalik is as good of a founder as you can have. But the fact that one would have to even ask the question, would you consider him a founder or not? The answer is murky. He doesn't hold enough to sway everything, but he has a lot, and consensus has a lot. But this is a red flag to me. This is trouble.
Well, I think that part of the kind of the piercing of the, the genius veil came a little bit just with the, coming to the L2, environment coming to fruition, and seeing that you're not seeing a direct correlational benefit to Ethereum, as the L1, leads you to wonder, like, okay, is the basis of this, whole thesis, somewhat off course? Because you see a lot of these companies and people and organizations saying, okay, well, we'll just build our own, or we'll just do this or that, on, L2s essentially, and creating their own. And I thought kind of the vision of it was that everything was going to, tap up and bubble up to, Ethereum as an L1. So you would want to see, you'd see subsequent upside, like, oh, a lot of people are using Base or using Optimism or whatever it is. You would see that reflect, and I just don't see any reflection of that. So I just don't know if, him building out further on cross L2 roadmaps is encouraging.
Yeah, I'm pulling up ultrasound money right now because you bring up several key points. Let's just see right now. I love this website, by the way. These guys did such a fantastic job with it. But the Ethereum supply in the last 7 days is inflationary again, and it has been for a while. Let's just roll to 30 days. It's been inflationary for 30. But it is still under where they were for the merge, because Ethereum did so well in that 2022, 2023 merge period that the deflationary nature was quite strong. But now, since pretty much April of this year, as you can see from this chart, it's been inflationary again. And it's not grossly inflationary, but it's inflationary, and that's a big problem. I'm just going back to the 7 day. I mean, it's 0.5%. That's nothing. I mean, the US dollar is probably, they call it 4 or 5% now, but it's probably like 10, 12, 13, because there's a lot of invisible forces there. So yeah, the L2s to me were an overpromise and underdeliver. There's a bunch of them, but the problem is that the ETH base chain is not benefiting as much as I would hope. So I am unstaking. Let's just see. ETH transfers account for 469 burnt ETH. Uniswap is the winner, which they always are, at 734. Tether is at 378. So Banana Gun, Maestro, MetaMask way down there now at 120. So Circle, which is USDC, there's a bunch of activity on the Ethereum chain, but unfortunately, I don't even see L2s on here rolling in, and maybe that's counted a different way, but to me, that's a problem. Like the L2s, it's like you get all the benefits of Ethereum, but we have to bridge over. Remember, I tried to bridge to, I believe it was back away from Optimism, my ETH, and there was a 7 day holding period, 7 full days to hold your money. And then, you wonder, a lot of these are multi-sig wallets, how decentralized is this? So, with Bitcoin, you move your money and it moves. You stay in L1 and you're on L1. So
No, I think I've been thinking about that. I think that's a very valid and interesting question, right? So if if you're into Vitalik and buying what he's selling at this point, he is starting to talk again and bring back elements of decentralization in kind of the goal and where it's going. But when you have L2s that are like operating, strictly like businesses, like traditional, TradFi businesses to a degree. So you can have Ethereum have all these principles, but if optimism is, playing, kind of old business rules and cutting deals and bringing it in and being fairly centralized, what does that do to the L1 overall? So it's an interesting, kind of dilemma where, okay, the L2s worked from that perspective, like they're cheap and they're growing and they're doing all that, but what other things are going to come in and potentially infect the L1 and the overall goal of some of the beauty of the kind of recipe to begin with?
Yeah, absolutely. So that's why I unstaked. And, a lot of people, a lot of Ethereum folks, especially folks in the more strong NFT communities, are like, oh, it's all going to cycle back to ETH. Everything goes in cycles. And yes, it will. And ETH will find another product market fit. ETH will be fine. But I don't know, just the short term to medium term roadmap just feels like if you want a little higher risk growth play, go Solana. And if you want actually another lower risk growth play, pick Bitcoin, because the adoption of big corporations we see literally in slow motion. I don't know if this was next, but I guess it's a perfect segue to, let's see, 1 to 2. So Microsoft, we Disco and I did a little breaking news last week. We had fun with that, but Microsoft board of directors have been asked to vote, and now it's in the proxy. And I actually voted this morning, Disco. My custodian sent me the email, and I clicked the button. It was actually quite painless and easy, almost so painless and easy. I'm like, do you even know who I am? Like, how do you know how many votes and how many shares I have? But and if you think about it, like Microsoft is such a big company at over 3 trillion. It's in so many ETFs and mutual funds that, like, and you pulled this up, BlackRock has 5.7, Vanguard has 9.1% of the shares of Microsoft. So there's some big entities, especially BlackRock, that hold Microsoft that could have an impact. I don't know. What do you think, Disco?
Well, I have a normie friend, and he's a great friend of mine, and he's considers himself quite a, basement investor, and he's been done very well by holding Microsoft. And I've been talking to him like, dude, you should probably get involved in some of this other stuff. And today he texted me this morning, he's like, I voted for Bitcoin. And I'm like, okay, that's your first exposure to it, and if you go through the lens of what you're saying, like, this may be the way that the most people get their exposure to Bitcoin, ironically enough, would be through, these major companies voting it through. And I think it's a fascinating, potential, tug of war of power when we know that Larry Fink is extremely, on board with this, and we know the influence that he's shown. So I know Vanguard was initially against the ETF, but I believe the guy who decided that got booted. So I don't know exactly where they stand from that side, but I could see, Larry Fink whipping it up and making this thing closer than people anticipate.
He could rock this whole thing. So just so everybody knows, the board, when they send out these proxy votes for all of us, teeny shareholders out there, and the big guys like BlackRock and Vanguard, they make a recommendation, and the board's recommendation was to deny putting Bitcoin in their treasury. Their treasury is $484 billion. Billion with a B, like $500 billion Microsoft has as a war chest in just cash and liquid assets. So putting 1 or 2% into Bitcoin, which would be what, $450 million. Think about the impact that would make. And their reason to vote no, they said, we're already using all sorts of modern and common tools to hedge against the dollar's inflation. We've already got that covered. So we recommend not doing this, and we don't need Bitcoin. And obviously for us, this is just laughable. I assume we saw the board of director makeup last week. It's literally Disney, Old Media, Old Guard, Wells Fargo, need I say more, Citibank, need I say more. There was a couple younger women who looked like companies I hadn't heard of. So I'm like, okay, maybe this is a little more cutting edge. Maybe they got fresh blood there. But for the most part, it looked to me like it was run by salt and pepper heads in the Old Guard. And they can vote no, but if there is a yes vote and Larry Fink whips everybody up from BlackRock, this will be interesting because now Microsoft is a $3 trillion company sitting on $484 billion. Let's say they put $400 million in 1%. That could literally rock the price of Bitcoin, and they would have been the first FANG mega giant to do it. They will do nothing but benefit as everybody's buying in and everybody else starts panicking. Somebody's going to be first. If you're not Microsoft, like I own your stock. If you're not, you'll be fine because you've got everyone locked into your crappy Excel subscriptions and Outlook and all that garbage and your Edge browser. But if you adopt Bitcoin at all, you might start being more profitable through your treasury than you are through probably 90% of the divisions in your company.
That's insane. You think of MicroStrategy, and obviously that kind of has proved it out. And, they're looking at that as a model. And it was this National Center for Public Policy, which is a conservative think tank that submitted this concept. And I think that, you gave an example. I was talking about my friend who voted yes. Like there may be more, kind of single retail people that end up saying yes to this than people might be accounting for. So it's December 10th is when kind of the vote, I think that's when it will come out, the results. And I just think that there could be a lot of calls being made and a lot of positioning in place, because as you say, just to be first in that, that it goes back to all the fundamentals of the fixed supply and everything like that there's only so much you can get. And now we've seen sovereigns, we've seen states, we've seen pensions. And now once we start seeing these massive companies who are not going to be generating profit necessarily just holding it in cash, I mean, it turns into almost a strategic no-brainer. And once someone flips on the light, it'll go across the circuitry.
Yeah. I just wanted to check while we were talking about this. I was like, is there any mega whales that could severely impact this? And I looked at Bill Gates, and he owned at one point up to 45% of Microsoft. That is down to like 1%. And most of that is in the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. So interestingly, it looks like, the Vanguard's at almost 10%, BlackRock at 6%, these big institutions hold a lot. And like I said, all these ETFs who can place these votes. And like you said, because it's in so many mutual funds, just retail folks like us, you're probably more optimistic than me. I don't think enough retail folks, I mean, how many times when you have your retirement portfolio or any portfolio, do you vote on the proxy stuff? That was literally the first time I've done it in probably 8 years. So maybe this will get their attention, and maybe there's enough where it does sway. If this gets voted yes by the shareholders and then the board follows through with it, that would be like literally whatever money you have that is not bolted to the ground would be like, it would be the most slow motion front run ever. It'd be like you get to play in one NFL football game, but they've slowed the tape down to 1/10 the speed. And you're back there with your old 1930s helmet and your like single piece swimsuit. And you're like running with the ball like Popeye used to, like it would be your one shot to front run this whole thing. And again, be ahead of this next Goliath wave of institutions that Michael Saylor and we all know is coming in 2025, when the accounting policies for corporations to be able to hold Bitcoin change so it is not considered a debt or a liability. It can be held in the treasury cleanly without being a huge burden. So this again, it's all happening at once. The timeline Disco and I think it's going to happen is always like, it's so obvious it's going to happen tomorrow. It's never tomorrow. It's always a year and a half from tomorrow, but it's happening and it's slow motion. We're at 72,000 now and we're still cheap.
Yeah. And just so say there's also a State Street entity that has just about 4%, and then Fidelity has 2.9, and we know Fidelity is already in the play, in this realm. So I don't know. I know I'm probably a little too optimistic on it, but you're right. Just, kind of getting the chapter in the book, and getting it to be, validated enough to be put to vote, I think is a huge step. So stay tuned on that.
Yeah. And it's such a big company that, the CEO, like, even medium-sized companies like CEOs can own, and the top management can own such a huge percentage of it. I suspect the board and the executive management, they have a lot of stock options and probably a lot of shares, but there's so much outstanding there. It's such an old juggernaut of a company that this could be an old school vote where there's just a bunch of factions, almost like the Hobbit, the 5 factions trying to kill the dragon and coming together and bringing the armies together to beat Smaug. But this will be interesting. Yeah, we'll keep you posted. But the reason this is so important is because their treasury is so big. I mean, what's Bitcoin right now? Like it's 72,000. I assume it's like 1.3 or 1.4 trillion or something value. Right. I mean, Microsoft has 484 billion. So even 484 million would make a huge dent. So it's a lot to think about.
No, it's just for people who are watching. And again, if you're watching or listening and you like what's going on, support independent media, give us any retweets, likes, etc. And also if you click into the box, you can make comments and we'd love to get your feedback. But I will say it seems fitting and it seems like it works having the Bitcoin logo next to like a Microsoft. Like it's weird to see it kind of have, the legitimization where it's like having that doesn't seem, it doesn't seem odd anymore. Like it seems like it makes sense. And it's just kind of like a kind of a pivotal, kind of moment where you're like, dude, having the Bitcoin logo next to Microsoft, you're not like, hey, what's that doing there? You're like, no, it's actually a strategy and it should be almost a partnership in terms of strategy moving forward. So it's kind of fun to see that come to life.
Yeah. And absolutely, it is a match made in heaven, but again, Bitcoin doesn't hurt. I love it. I love that you made Bitcoin bigger than Microsoft because really at the end of the day, Bitcoin's like, okay, yeah, adopt me. Like if you don't, like it's your own problem. So,
yeah,
cool. So moving on, this kind of ties into Ethereum and the election, doesn't it? So Disco, why don't you take us into to Polymarket and in Polygon and just kind of what your thoughts are?
Well, we've been talking so much and we've been seeing, a big acceptance and, just a ton of attention put towards Polymarket overall, especially Indian and everything. And you would think, okay, it did a good job. And I will say Polymarket does a good job of being one of those examples of kind of having, the technology behind the scenes. You don't feel necessarily like you're on a Web3, experience or anything like that. But when we realize that, oh, duh, it's called Polymarket and, it's built on Polygon, you're like, okay, so Polygon must be seeing a significant uptick in terms of, a lot of different things and seeing, some revenue coming in there. But it came out, that it looks like they've only generated about 27,000 in user fees from Polymarket for the whole year. So while you see all this transaction, you can see just how much has been bet in place just on the presidential election. You would think that number would be significantly higher. So it's just kind of a bit of a head scratcher to dig a little bit deeper on to see the benefit to the actual L2, and then again to the bigger question, the benefit of the L2 up to Ethereum layer 1.
Yeah, absolutely. So 2.64 billion has been put on the winner of the presidential election. $2.6 billion, which is just a huge number. And again, Trump is up now. Like it's 67%. So Kamala went up like right after they announced her, but now it's just running away. So we'll see how biased this market is to Republicans or how real it is. I suspect the the split in votes will not certainly be 67-33, but those swing states, it looks like a lot of people are pretty confident that Trump's going to win. And my gut, if I had to guess, that's kind of where I'm leaning to, which, again, would be great for Bitcoin, and hopefully with RFK would be great for the entirely broken healthcare system. But the $27,000 for Polygon, and that's at first I thought that was their profit. I'm like, are you idiots? 2.6 billion was bet and you couldn't take 1%. I think Polymarket is making plenty of money because I believe most of these bets are done in USDC. So, basically US dollars in a stable coin. But the fees, it just shows you how much of it can be handled and rolled up in Polygon. And I think Polymarket of Polygon's only like a fraction of that. So it's a bit of a head scratcher. We like Polymarket for its predictive capabilities, but let's see what happens.
Yeah. Again, I think it also, the thing that's fascinating to me is this whole L2, environment, and seeing that, just seeing how it does or doesn't bubble up even to, from Polymarket to Polygon and again to Ethereum. That's kind of the question that keeps coming up to me.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. So moving on from Polygon, now we get to the main event, the main spar, nice image. And, using Venice AI, Disco can get these images. If you try and use ChatGPT or Anthropic, some of these, they have clamped down on just silly things like, this is for people like us who are doing podcasts. This is such a perfect thing to be able to get an image of an election of people sparring, yet in those you're not even allowed to do that or really get information on politics while the election's going on. I get their overprotection, but we're all adults here, you're elected officials, and no, you can't censor AI just like you can't censor the blockchain. We need everything to kind of be open source at the same time. So 6 days left. 6 days. It's almost unbelievable. I'm like, oh, it's 9 months out. It's a long afterthought. We're about to enter the uncertainty in 6 days of yet another election. I can guarantee it's going to be uncertain, but I don't know. Where's your head at, Disco?
Well, I've been thinking about the uncertainty, but then I do remember, 2016 that came out and there wasn't any uncertainty. It was Trump won that. It was, they were pretty much saying that Hillary was going to win. The polls got it wrong, but that was kind of figured out that night, it was declared, he was declared the winner that evening. So
yeah, I believe it was in Central Time. I think it was 12 or 1 in the morning. Cause I remember I called my mom and at 11 and they were watching a movie. They're like, oh, we're not even going to deal. And my mom grew up a Democrat and she was a Democrat. And I'm like, Mom, she's going to lose. My mom's like, she quit messing with me. Cause I was the youngest. I'd always mess, just be sarcastic and mess with her. I'm like, Dad, tell her to turn on the TV. They turned on the TV. She just her jaw just dropped. You're right. I forgot about that. And then the uncertainty was 2020. And that one, took a lot longer, but then Trump never admitted defeat. Cause when was it officially called? The next day or a couple days later?
No. It was all the big swing state cities took weeks to finalize the counting. So it was Milwaukee and Philadelphia and, so those states that ended up having significant urban centers took a long time. And that was what was so weird because, Trump was way ahead in the beginning when you get the rural vote in, but then, it'd go on days and days and you'd see it start ticking up once they count more districts. So if the Polymarket is on point and if our, kind of our spidey senses have gotten to this point that, it could be to that degree, then we may have closure way quicker than I think we're anticipating. So it's something to think about. And then also when you look at the Polymarket breakdown of, what do we say? Almost 70%, right? That's factoring in, that's just on who's going to win. So that's not a popular vote or that's not a popular vote thing. That's assuming, a majority of the swing states go to Trump. So that's baked into that, kind of higher percent when you think about it.
Yeah. So, I mean, I hope it is quick. And I guess if he does win, do you think the Democrats will concede and Kamala will concede and go quietly?
That's a $1 zillion question. My assumption is that they would, simply based on 2016. And again, I
Right.
just keep going back to that. Like, they accepted it and, didn't really put up anything on
Yeah.
that. So, Hillary, so that's the only playbook that I can see. Of course, I've heard, theories and thoughts about things that could be, taking place in big cities and stuff like that. And again, my only hope is that we can get clarity, we can get closure, we can move forward as soon as we possibly can, because we have so many positive things going on. And if we could, I know it sounds like a plea, but if we could ever just get past some of the partisanship and focus on moving us forward, it just would be we could really see a nice boom in terms of just our appreciation of life overall. So I would just love to get out of kind of this toxicity of just battling against each other.
Yeah, and I guess the only fallback to battling against each other is just that's when voters like us are like, well, you know what, then just give me gridlock, because like you can't have crazy stuff that's passed that just makes things 100 times worse. So, yeah, I mean, a lot to think about, a lot to look at. We talked a couple weeks ago about Google and how they basically have tried to manipulate the election by steering people with certain search phrases, or when you type in how it finishes your phrase. And there's a guy who's doing a whole website on that, and even Google people admitting that they can steer an election up to about, I think it was 2%. I mean, think about that, 2% of the whole country. That's huge, and they know with those algorithms how to manipulate it. So there's a little story possibly that Trump's interview on Joe Rogan actually got suppressed through YouTube, which is obviously owned by Google as well. And I don't know. It certainly would be easy to do, and they did admit, oh yeah, for certain search terms like Trump election, Joe Rogan,
It's only 6 words,
just little ones, just election, United States, nothing major.
It's a little basket,
It wasn't the long tail of keywords, corn on the cob election or something. So it's interesting, and that just plays right into it. Certainly doesn't surprise me that they would subtly or even not so subtly suppress, especially if maybe there was some desperation. Because remember, I grew up in a Democratic family. I grew in a Democratic area. I get more emails and texts, and I block them all from the Democratic Party. And they're like 900% match. Like, this is serious. Like, we're losing. Wow. And we're like, and I don't know if that's just how you get people to donate money to your campaign, by making it fear-based. But since the beginning of summer, it started at, hey, we'll match your donation. Then it was 200%, 300%. Now it's at 900%, like 900. So so if I donate $100, they'll $900 it. So they'll 9x it. Right. So it's like, how either that's super desperate, or that's just how you get votes now. I don't know. It's felt desperate to me, and I certainly haven't liked it.
Yeah, I think there's so many signs of, that being desperate. And because what are they going to use the money for right now? Like, how many people have already voted? How much of the media is already placed? Like, how is it, 6 days out, we're going to be like, oh, we need a big stash of money because we didn't realize how to use it before. So it seems just like there's an alarm going off, and it's scary.
Absolutely. I mean, yeah, there's only so many Sunday football games and Saturday football games to put your money in. Like, there's only one weekend left.
Yeah, and they love they love to jump into the football. We've noticed, you can't,
Both of them,
you know,
yeah. I think they
yeah,
give
they're
each one like a quarter. That's what football is really smart because you and I used to dabble in advertising in past lives, and the smartest thing I ever saw was like, you're like, how could you have multiple beer sponsors? You're like, oh, one per quarter. You're like, so it's like Coors,
you're
then
the exclusive
Budweiser, then
sponsor of the first quarter.
right. Which I mean, obviously that's all they have. They have so few games, you have to do it that way. Whereas baseball, I assume you probably can't really do that, except for maybe in the World Series or something. But yeah, I mean, here we go. I mean, by the time we do another show, this is crazy to think about. The election will be over. There will be no more voting, and it sounds like we will probably next Wednesday have a winner. So,
And
you
if
know,
we do, I think that if we do have a winner, then it would indicate, what I was saying, that I think that, Trump would be that winner that would be decided that quickly. But then we have to think about a lot of the day one, promises that tie to our industry, and they're evolving a little bit because he just came out. I think it was yesterday, in favor of kind of this is his quote: "They have them paying tax on crypto, and I don't think that's right. Bitcoin is money, and you have to pay capital gains tax if you use it to buy a coffee?" I was talking to a friend, and he said it shouldn't be taxed, and I agree. Maybe we get rid of taxes on crypto and replace it with tariffs. So just interesting ideas coming out there.
it is kind of fascinating if you think about it. And obviously getting into macro in that big of a scale where like is America our economy, we're certainly the biggest economy in the world. We're certainly the biggest consuming economy in the world per dollar wise anyway. We don't have the most population, but I mean, Americans consume a lot of crap. Our whole economy is based off of it. So to tariff everybody who wants to sell us stuff and to collect a lot of revenues that way and to lower our taxes, let's say he goes like the old 10% flat fee, which would be awesome. Like, can you imagine if we could pull something like that off and they streamline the government? The hard thing is obviously then you've got people out of jobs and then you have unrest. Like there's nothing's ever as easy to unwind
Yeah.
as it looks, but that this will be, like you said, I mean, Ross Ulbricht is on the table for day one. Like you said, no tax on Bitcoin. I mean, that would be absolutely crazy where that would be that would kind of then make it a global reserve currency. That would be a base currency then if there's no taxes in and out of that growth is just, I mean, can you imagine if there was no tax on that? Basically, the vehicle we've been putting in for growth now is literally it'd be like if the U.S. dollar was deflationary and it just kept gaining in value. You people, conservative savers like you and I, would just be incentivized to save because it literally snowballs in value over time. Like
Yeah,
nobody,
and you can't.
there's ever been money that had that mindset.
Yeah, and you can't print more. Like, so it stops, exactly what is the potential big pitfall down the road, right? So it sounds so simple, and when you do take that next kind of layer into it, the potential of the impact is just seismic. And I just feel, I go off of gut and I go off of empathy, and I just feel like it's going that way. And I think that once, if they get into play, if they get into that position, I think we're going to have it go at a very accelerated rate in terms of the acceptance. And then I think that, the people that have been holding and believing are really going to benefit. And the ones that have been on the side are going to have to pay for it at a much higher rate.
Yeah, well, like I am cautiously optimistic there because like when you get in the office and there's so many departments and stuff, who knows how the power plays will happen. But I mean, he is a break crap, ask question later person. So yeah, maybe you're right. Maybe these are executive orders and the world just like whatever damage happens to the whole of the ship, we're like, whoa, like all the lifeboats are gone. Well, but then the ship starts flying, into Bitcoin land. So
Well, we've never had somebody go back into that office after being out of it. So we've never had somebody already have experience of, what to do and how to, kind of execute different things based on being in the seat for 4 years. So there is an interesting component of kind of getting the steering wheel back of something that you've already driven. And that'll probably make that first 100 days that people always talk about be like crazy accelerated, would be my take.
Yeah, because I feel like in his last presidency, I think he had a lot of guardrails and people who kept him from doing rash things. Now, I think he's, like you said, he's already been president, so he's like he knows his playbook, and he can move super fast, which is both exhilarating and terrifying. But at least we're eyes wide open, looking at what the possibilities are for our families, for our community, and kind of, I think we're lucky, we Bitcoiners, because we have an understanding of the financial system and how precarious it is right now, and where it very quickly could be heading with all the stories we shared today. The final little piece, it's more of a side note, but I kind of liked this one, just going, nice dig. But Jeff Bezos, who owns the Washington Post, is almost like, it's almost like owning like a pet hamster. You're like, oh yeah, and then I've got this little hamster. I mean, because newspapers don't matter anymore. And he so much has said that, basically saying they didn't endorse a president, which is unheard of for a newspaper.
Yeah, supposedly they were supposed to endorse Kamala, and then the scuttlebutt was that Bezos was like, well, I don't want to, get on the wrong side of, if that goes through, like, I don't want to be dealing with, any sort of ramifications of her not winning. But then he did an op-ed, and he basically said that he was already talking about doing it this way because he feels like it's a meaningful step in the right direction to reverse the loss of trust in the media by Americans. So he's taking that position. And, his statement, one of the subsequent statements in there was like, it's not like we make a difference with doing this. He's like, we're not going to get we're not going to get somebody to be like, oh, because the Post endorsed it, now I'll be going that way. So
Right.
it's in a weird way, it's a pretty forward thinking sentiment about an asset that you own, and a reflection of like, dude, why are we doing it this way? And they lost like 200,000 digital subscribers from, liberal fallout from it because they didn't go that route. But I don't know. He may stand, history may look relatively interested in this take, because that is a stance for someone to take owning a major newspaper.
Well, and think about it. Like, you're right. It is a groundbreaking stance, because he basically said mainstream media is broken. They don't trust us anymore. So why are we going to do the same old rubber stamp and endorse a president? And obviously with Amazon, any sitting president could, which we see with the Biden administration and Elon, how much of a pain you can be if the government's not on your side. I mean, can you imagine if the government were actually working more closely with SpaceX? Really, the only cheapest way to get into space, to launch satellites, to put people in the space station, and obviously to go to Mars and beyond. Like, and they're basically like goading him. Like, it's, to me, it's mind-boggling. But he knows he has a lot to lose with Amazon, because any president could slap penalties and tariffs, and they could make their lives very difficult very quickly. But I hope he's being honest, which, I mean, who knows? As a billionaire, I'm sure Amazon's still his first and foremost thing he needs to protect. But to not endorse a president, I think is pretty cool. And like you said, it could be the first step in a new era of like, you know what? We're going to be honest, media. Maybe they'll gain another 300,000 independents who are like, oh, cool. Now I can get news from DC that actually feels like it's looking at both sides and critiquing both sides and looking at the real issues, and not just like, this side's terrible, this side's awesome. Maybe we go into a new era of like open-mindedness.
And I feel like the capacity to do so from content creation as well as from the platforms and the ability and the access to platforms is unlike it's ever been before. Before there were, X amount of, FCC licenses for broadcasters across, all the different medias and formats.
Yep.
But now, even just us being able to have a conversation and go, live on X and everything like that, we're not filtered. We're able to look at things critically. And that's really what we're trying to do. If we're upfront with our audience, is create, kind of a system and a network where people can look at the stories and then kind of take a look at, okay, what does that mean? And I know that, like, to our audience, I want to just promise, like, we're always going to say, kind of our takes on it. And it's always going to err on the side of being, more genuine to our emotion. And in doing that, I think that would be an extremely refreshing reset on the media system that we have right now. You don't need the FCC to control who's allowed to, broadcast. You don't need governments to control, who's allowed to say what or what platforms are allowed to exist. Let it go and let the people kind of have their own conversations and gravitate towards people that they identify with.
Yeah, that's well stated. I would say genuine to emotion and to the research and really trying to dig and get to the bottom of things. Because I think when you start doing your own homework and researching these topics, it's very evident very quickly that it's easy for your own brain to get hijacked on information because it gets repeated over and over. And a lot of times things get repeated over and over, people take as true when a lot of times they're not necessarily true. And it's caused, I know me, and I assume Disco too, it's caused me to question and put in question so many elements of things we've been told. And then you start going back, be like, well, what else isn't really on the up and up, and that was very whitewashed or politically motivated? And there's probably quite a bit. So, and we're only as good as kind of the sources that we can get. So I think that's why, like, citizen journalism, keeping X open and free, and things that hopefully are even better than X, or X opens its algorithm so we can start picking our own algorithm. I don't know if you saw, Disco, like Farcaster, their revenues are down 96% since February. Like, a lot of interest in Farcaster has gone down. It probably is on par with how ETH is kind of fallen out of the limelight. You got Nostr on the Bitcoin, and it's more the maxis right now, but Nostr is more decentralized, and that's kind of the Bitcoin answer. And I think it's not really owned by anyone as much, whereas Farcaster has A16Z behind it. And Farcaster's a lot of big VCs, and like I was actually an early adopter of Farcaster. I think I have an ETH NFT that it just was in my wallet that people are offering me 1 ETH for it. I was like, oh man, like, so I got this OG thing, and I tried to go on there for a while when I was still more ETH heavy, and to break through to the people that they had kind of made that ring of influencers. Like, it's just a different platform, a different algorithm, and a different ring of influencers that's very hard to break into. And I'm sure if I was persistent and patient, I could have, but it wasn't the perfect fit for me. Like, I just put the nouns curling video on there because obviously a lot of nouns are there, but even that one, I put it in the nouns channel, and it's gotten some hits, but not a ton. Like, it feels a little quiet over there right now. I know I haven't been in a while, so.
Yeah. And, it's just, I've been thinking about that a lot in terms of, moving forward. How can we have it be more representative of, kind of a non-influencer, feed? And, it's a little a little disheartening when you look and you see the sophistication of these, influencer networks, and just how, it's just upfront. It's not like even ashamed. It's unabashed. Be like, hey, we have a shilling service, or we have this or that. And it's like, dude, is that real? But knowing that is, part of the business, it makes you concerned about, this future where those are the tactics that lead to the results, and those are the tactics that ultimately influence your excitement. And when we look at, meme coins and the proliferation of that, and you look at, all these other things, it's really, kind of just changes how you believe in what you're seeing. It's like, oh, there's all that thing's mad crazy. It's going nuts. It's like, well, is it? And why? And just, I don't know. Their transparency that is going to evolve in terms of how these things are promoted and discovered and come out is something that I'm looking forward to, having some light shed on it.
Yeah, I think the weirdest thing is the integrity issue, and you nailed it. Like, there's your timeline just gets filled with so much pump and pamp, and even a lot of our good friends, like you get, it's just natural to pump your bags, and there's obviously folks like Stephen Miller who are just so authentic and just are doing it. Obviously they're doing it because they love art and they want to be in the space, but they do it because they love the art and they love the artists. And it's okay to make money in this space, but there's so much with the meme coin and the different collections. Like I think I finally officially reached like NFT. I shouldn't say NFT, ordinal kind of burnout. Like I have the ones I want. Every once in a while I'll see one I really want, but that's why I just go back to like one-on-ones and art, and that's the stuff that to me that should last the longest. But the influencer networks, you said something interesting when we were chatting yesterday. Like you were looking at this and they actually called their service like the shilling service. Like it's all going from mainstream media to these influencer networks, but it's still hidden behind the scenes. Whereas the networks and the mainstream media, there was an agenda that was peppered in with the news. So you just didn't know. And you never really, most of us, I should say, until maybe COVID, didn't really ever question the authenticity of this unless something really stood out. But those of us who've been in crypto and Bitcoin and saw a lot of the politicians lying about things that have been debunked in like 2016, you're like, oh, wait a second. They're not changing their tune, not because they're naive. It's because that's their narrative. Like that's their story. And that doesn't even mean it's the truth. So then again, you ask all those other questions, and now the influencer networks, that's why I love like Truth Labs and Zach and all these guys, because they're calling these folks out. You and I haven't taken a dime in any advertising or anything. And, we don't really want to, because right now we just want to grow the show and be authentic. I mean, look what happened to Bankless. They started sucking and now they're unlistenable because you don't know, even though they're like, oh, there's a sheet of our 800 sponsors and angel things we angel invest in. And you look, you're like, you're mentioning all of these and their competitors. So nothing you say is, except for like, I had 2 cups of coffee this morning, is unbiased. And that's when I stopped listening. All the ETH folks and anybody who's kind of an OG in this space, and even newer people, are like, I know bullshit when I smell it, and I'm not listening to this. And the ETH side, it was rampant. Unfortunately, it's rampant now on the ordinal side, but you got to pick who you listen to and pick smartly, because you can be like us and try and get to the bottom of stuff and have fun, buy art, get into PFP, get into big collections of groups and meme coins. Like it's fun, but also just know when you're getting played and know when you're getting hijacked, because it's easy to do it even when you know the playbook and even when you know who the influencer networks are.
Yeah. And somewhat tied to that, I went through a bit of a awakening or epiphany this week, because I was looking into, kind of these stories of, optimism is the super chain, and they have all these, clients building on the optimism stack and everything. Right. So you'd see headlines of like, Kraken's going to do their L2 on optimism, and we already know Base is there and everything. And, the person that's in charge, their chief growth officer, is a guy, Ryan Watt, who before was doing that role for Polygon. And I remember those headlines, before, and that got me into it. It was like, oh, we're doing our deal with Starbucks is choosing Polygon to build. And then just a little nugget from the Kraken news today is they gave them, 25 million optimism tokens, to get moving on this. So it just is an example of having to go past the headline and looking deeper on how things are made. And this is all, coming from, that's going to be difficult to do if, sources like YouTube could potentially bury a interview with a huge candidate on a
Yep.
massive show. So, the arms and legs of the reach of this are just really, really, really staggering. And it's a challenge. And there's some people in my life and people I come across that just are not up for it. Like, they don't care. I'll be like, dude, can't you see we're being manipulated? And they're like, dude, I don't care, man. What's for dinner? And it's,
It's
but
true.
those of us who have, that are, inspired to try to have an impact on this, it can be very challenging, but ultimately pretty fulfilling if we can end up on the right side of it. So interestingly enough, that Jeff Bezos, in an odd way, maybe could have, started pushing for a different change, which would be great.
Yeah, there's so many little changes here with adoption, with not picking a candidate for a newspaper. So again, from crypto obviously to AI, like we want it all decentralized and open source. And when augmented reality really and virtual reality really become where we're spending way more time in there, which the time is going to come. Like I can't wait to have like a custom room that I can be in there with you and a bunch of people I know, sharing art, sharing music, and like making that like a hang place. And it's not there yet. Obviously, it's still kind of jaggy, and after a half hour, you're like, it's fine, but I'm getting a little vertigo-y. But that all needs to be open. And as Snoop Toshi in her interview said so smartly, like data privacy is huge, and most people still don't care about it. But you know what? You should, because
Yeah.
for your kids and their kids, and for just quality of life on this planet, as this planet gets more and more technological, and cameras are a penny a piece, and there's literally a camera on every angle of the world. Like, is that the world we want, where it's like this weird paranoia world where it's all staring at each other, and there's people who can like zoom in and out of it anywhere? Like, no, we want a world that's more open and free and natural, with all these things open source, so the citizens have an equal playing field to the powers that be.
Yeah, I mean, Eric Voorhees, on the show said that quite similarly when we were asking, what's the biggest motivator for, decentralized AI, and he's like, well, it's not the privacy, So that was both of those guys, who are pretty far down the road in this, have come back with that kind of feedback.
Sad to see. Yeah, so that's not there. They're not leading with that in their advertising. Certainly for me, that was I was like, I'm in. Like, and I tell my kids to use Venice now, and there's other open source, more privacy based AI models, but for me, I'm gonna have my kids use the one that's not tracking you, because Snoop Toshi again said it, and so did Eric. Like, the information that people are giving, like when you type in Google, you're like, where's the nearest McDonald's? Where's, maybe how do I get a wart off my foot is as bad as you're going to go. But with AI, you're like, well, I'm really kind of lonely, and how do I date girls better? Yeah, I'm just making this up, but like
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
you're
It's intimate.
giving a whole new level of information and intimacy that they couldn't quite scoop before. It's less transactional, like you said. It's more intimate, and you could kind of bare your soul more, and that gets marketed against you, used against you, and it probably gets mined and collected through the government and through companies that are just going to use that and share the info among themselves. So it's
Um,
we're heading the right direction, but it was a big quintuple soapbox we just did. But this is the stuff that's important to us, so hopefully it's important to you too.
Yeah. So when we get together next week, things are going to be different, and we'll have definitely some thoughts as to where we think things will head, and what's going on. And again, if you guys ever have ideas for topics to cover, or feedback, thoughts, etc., we love all of the above. And we do this show every week for entertainment purposes only. Please don't construe anything to be financial advice. And with that, we'll we'll check back in a couple days and see what's going on.
Take care, everybody. Till next week.